All right. Good morning, folks. Happy Friday and welcome to Coffee with Community Services. Can't believe it's already August 4th, but here we are, right? Almost all the way through our summer. I have nieces and nephews going back to school next week, and I can't believe that it's already that time. So as usual, we'll kind of introduce some of our regional center staff that we have on today. As you can see, John Decker is not going to be with us today. He is traveling with the directors of community services. So he'll be back next week. But co-hosting with me today, I have Michelle Duchesne. She's another community services manager, and Helen Neary. I also see today that we have some of our community services staff that focus on all our adult services. I see Scott Barr. Good morning, Scott. Alicia Gauchi, who's our HCBS specialist. She's going to be sharing with us today. And Tom, good morning, Tom, newer to the community services unit, previously service coordinator. Good morning, Miss Rowena, client services manager in our residential unit. And we have Rhonda, our new housing specialist. I think you guys have all been introduced to Rhonda. Good morning, Jennifer Bloom. We have a client, an associate director of client services, sorry. And Carly is our employment specialist. Miss Cindy Lay, we have our client services manager in our adult unit. And I see we have some more community service folks. Good morning, Jason. Jason's going to be sharing some updates on family coordinated support services. And I see Leah. Leah also is on Michelle's team working for adult services, residential mainly. And Christy Schaefer. Good morning, Christy Schaefer. She's one of our specialized resource developers, helping us a lot right now with social rec grants. Good morning, Carol. Carol, our SLS and deaf part of hearing manager. Good morning, Beverly. And good morning, Rima. Rima's going to share some of the sign of the week and the Deaf 101 culture today. She's also going to share with us some updates about some vendor forum and public events that are going to be happening. So we got about 62 folks on, so we got a good crew. Good morning, David Lopez, our client advocate. Hi, Heidi. Heidi is a client services manager in our Grass Valley office. And let's see. Those are most of the folks with the pictures on. So I will go ahead and get my screen ready for Rima. Let me get you pinned here, Miss Rima, so that you can share with us the sign of the week and your updates. So add as a pen. All right, good morning.
You're muted. We can't hear you.
Thank you. This is Rima. I can't see the interpreter. Oh, I can see the interpreter now. Okay.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
It is back to school season. And so I'm going to teach you the sign for back to school. So we've got, this is your handshake. That's a sign for school, 2 times. School. Reading. This is your handshake. Reading. Like your eyes are looking at a book. And wiggle your fingers on your open palm. That's to study. Also, I posted in the YouTube, and I will email this out to everybody. I haven't had a chance to do that. So you're probably wondering, where's the email? But I will do that after the meeting. I wanted to show you there's some videos on ASL and about back to school stuff, and some cute things on YouTube. So it's some repetitive ASL signs that I've developed for YouTube. And then there's also could be a question of, what about educational placement for deaf and hard of hearing students? So the deaf school is where the kids stay and they sleep there. That's a residential school. And then they also have bilingual, bicultural schools, where there is a strong day program that is focused on supporting English and ASL with cultural exposures. And then also general mainstream, where a deaf student will go to a hearing school with a deaf program, and typically they're the only deaf person in the hearing school. So there's a variety of educational placements that look at for deaf students. The National Association for the Deaf, NAD, strongly encourages, and that many deaf people do too, to involve your deaf children in visual language, because deaf and hard of hearing, that is their strength. That's our strength. With our 5 senses, we are more focused on visual, on our eyes. We rely on our eyes for our language, for our communication, and to teach signs as early as possible. There's some controversy right now to how to encourage deaf children to speak along with signing. They can learn both. They can learn both at the same time, but it's a good support for speech therapy to have them sign. And so that goes along with Deaf 101 and language acquisition. So with parents and us in the agencies and SLAs, I strongly suggest that you reach out to your deaf and hard of hearing agencies. With ALTA, it would be NorCal Center. They have a whole host of resources and have wonderful advocate services for parents and for people that require more support, whether they're children in school or young adults. And that's it for me. Back to you, Jordan.
Thank you. I do have a quick question for you, Rima. I see on our calendar that we have a vendor forum coming up, and that so I was hoping you could speak to that.
Oh, thank you. I forgot about that. Oh, I forgot about the vendor forum. Okay. Yeah, I got Friday brain. All right. Thank you so much. So it was Deaf and Hard of Hearing Forum. That will be next week, Wednesday. I want to make sure that I've got the right. Yes, August 9th at 1 o'clock. It will be viral, be on video. So if you want to know what that's about, or if you have any hard of hearing clients, please encourage everybody. Everyone is welcome to join. And it'll be the first time that we're joining. The first time we're going to be doing a lot of introductions. And then later on in the forums, we'll do some training. So our deaf and hard of hearing clients, we want to be able to support them to thrive. So that's the focus of our forum for next week.
Excellent. Does anybody have any questions on the forum? No. I also saw, Rima, I'm not sure if you'll be going, but I see there's a Deaf Awareness Day at Six Flags Discovery Kingdom on August 12th. I'm not sure if that's something that you'll be attending, or if you want to, if you have info.
Well, I'm not able to go. I'd like to. It's pretty fun. It's a great social time for people to see people that you don't typically get to see. I've got other plans for that day, so darn.
Yeah, right.
But if you've got clients, bring them. Go to Six Flags. It's a great opportunity to have fun and to socialize with other deaf people that they get to meet for the first time, and maybe to see their old friends that they haven't seen for a while.
Very cool. Yeah, it sounds like it would be fun. It is on our Alta events calendar. I'll be sharing some of that calendar at the end of coffee. So if you guys want any further details, definitely go to altaregional.org and go to our events calendar, and there'll be info on there for you. Thank you so much, Rima.
Yeah, thank you for sharing.
All right. So next on our agenda, Alicia, our HCBS specialist, is going to share with us some updates on the modification process. So let me give you I'm going to make you a co-host here, Alicia, and I'm going to pin you so everyone can see you. Just 1 second. She might having a matter with her video. If so, we can go to the next agenda item and switch back. I'll give her just a second. She might have been having a connection issue. Why don't we, Jason, if you're up for it, we'll switch to Jason and he can give his updates. We'll give Alicia a second to get her technology working.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I don't have a whole lot of updates, but I wanted to let you know that I do have three service providers that I'm working with right now for coordinated family supports. One of them is almost all the way done. I just needed to get clarification from DDS in regards to the assessment rate, which I just got this morning. And then the other two, I'm in the process of reviewing program designs. I did find out recently as well too that there is a different rate for if you're providing direct services with coordinated family supports, and that would be if you had to provide, you know, like direct support staffing, if a situation were to happen where the client needed support and there was no other forms of support, whether it be natural support or you know, a different service that we're currently funding for at the regional center. The rate for that would be $30.59. So that would be a subcode that would be added to the rate. And then the original 076 rate is $58.64. So if anybody, any service provider is interested in doing coordinated family supports, please reach out to me. I'll go ahead and put my email address in the chat. But we need more providers. I got 2 emails from service coordinators this morning asking about this service, so it's in high demand.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And that's good. That's exciting. Great information's coming along, right? So
Absolutely. Yep.
right. So that's exciting. Any questions on that from our community? All right. Well, Jason put his information in the chat there, so we'll definitely keep you posted on how that goes. And thank you so much for the vendors that have applied and are interested. We're excited to be working with you guys. Let me switch up my pins.
Alicia is back on, Jordan.
Perfect. So I'm going to get Miss Alicia set up here. And just one second, you know, it's interesting. I had a pen. There we go. Bear with me, my technology skills. Okay. All right, Miss Alicia, you got the floor.
Hi. So I'm going to talk about HCBS requirements and do a quick overview, and then I'm going to dive into what we call the modification process that's written into law, because that seems to be where a lot of vendors and service coordinators are confused. So just as an overview, HCBS is home and community-based services, defined as services that are provided in a person's home-related settings. So that includes RMs, employment programs, some independent living situations. The final rule is a change in federal regulation regarding HCBS type settings. So the rule applies to settings where services are provided both residential and non-residential. These laws are overseen by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So it does have like a big impact on our budget if we aren't getting those funds through the waiver program. So HCBS, a lot of people, when we are doing like getting compliant on paper, a lot of providers are wondering if they are required to follow HCBS regulations. HCBS regulations are for vendors who provide services only for disabled individuals. So if you have community members in your program, then you would not be HCBS evaluated, and programs that are in congregate settings, meaning that you serve more than just a one-on-one population. So the personal attendant services, independent living skill services, those are individual type programs. If you're a vendor who provides classes that community members and individuals with disabilities attend, then you'd also not fall under the HCBS regulations. So keep that in mind. Right now, everybody who is vendored with Alta is HCBS compliant on paper, meaning that they have protocols and program designs that meet HCBS regulations. It does not mean that we are all compliant in practice, which is something that will be evaluated by Regional Center and continue to be evaluated by Regional Center going forward. So just as a quick overview, there are 10 federal regulations. The first 5 of them are for all programs that fall under HCBS, and the last 5 are for residential programs only. So I'm pulling those up. So the first requirement is that the service is integrated in and supports full access to the community, including opportunities to seek employment, engage in community life, control personal resources. The key to federal requirement 1 is that individuals have the same degree of access as individuals not receiving regional center services. Federal requirement 2 is the choice of setting. So individuals get to choose their setting from among various options, including those non-disability specific options. And those options should be identified in the individual program plan based on needs, preferences, resources available, etc. So the third federal requirement is the right to be treated well. We've had for a long time in California the right of privacy, dignity, respect. Freedom from coercion and restraint was sort of implied, and now it's written into those federal regulations. Federal requirement 4 is that we're not regimenting individual initiative and independence in making life choices. So we aren't giving individuals a list of activities to choose from. We are letting them choose what they want to do with their day, just like you or I would. A federal requirement 5 that applies to all settings is that there is choice regarding services and supports and who provides them. So individuals have a say in who their staff is, what programs they attend, what they do with their day. These are just all basic human rights that we all have with our day-to-day lives. The second 5 are those residential specific rules. They include having a residential agreement with eviction processes comparable to those under California's landlord-tenant law. They include privacy. Individuals have the right to have doors, their bedroom doors lockable with only staff having keys to doors as needed. That individuals sharing who have roommates have a choice of roommates, and that individuals have the freedom to furnish and decorate their sleeping or living units within their lease. Federal requirement 8 is access to food and to control their own schedules and activities. We shouldn't be locking up cabinets for individuals unless direly needed. Federal requirement 9 is that individuals can have visitors of their choosing at any time. And federal requirement 10 is that the setting is physically accessible to the individual. They should be able to ambulate through their home and access their kitchen, bedroom, bathroom. We shouldn't have like stairs. When an individual's in a wheelchair, they can't get to the kitchen due to stairs being there. So those are the 10 rules. So we will be having in-person evaluations coming. We're hiring more HCBS specialists. The evaluations are probably going to include some sort of client interview, since HCBS regulations are based on client experiences rather than like physical location and policies in place. They'll include a review of the IPP and any modifications that may be in place, and a site review too, to make sure that things like doors aren't locked, people can access their space. What kinds of schedules of activities do you have? What kind of client input do you have proof of that individuals are able to choose how they're spending their days? So when we talk about a modification process to meet the needs of individuals who may not fall into these categories, there may be a barrier or a reason an individual can't follow a federal requirement. When we're talking about that, the modification process is written into the law. So it's not something that we came up with to just determine like, oh, like we think that we should have this in order to not follow these federal regulations. The modification process is written into federal law. So we have to make sure that we are following that modification process to a T. That's part of what our evaluations will be. And this is where a lot of our community services specialists and service coordinators are finding disconnect. So in order for a modification process to be put into place, it has to be supported by a specific assessed need and outlined clearly in the IPP. We can't just write so-and-so is low functioning and can't use door locks, so we're not going to lock their door. And we can't just write due to health and safety, we're not following federal requirement 4, 5, and 6. We have to follow the specific outlined instructions, which includes identifying a specific and assessed need, saying what that need is. This is what we've assessed it to be. You have to document positive interventions and supports prior to modifications. So before you even come to the team with a modification request, you have to have documented positive interventions and supports that you've used beforehand. Document what a behavior specialist has recommended and what has been tried and hasn't worked. You have to document less intrusive methods of meeting the need. Like, have you tried, if for an individual who's sneaking food out of the kitchen, have you tried putting like an alarm when they walk through so it just makes like a doorbell sound so that staff know that they're going to the kitchen and can sort of like provide positive support in making good choices before we just lock up the cabinet. We have to include a clear description of a condition that's directly proportionate to the need. We have to have regular collection and a review of data to measure the ongoing effectiveness of a modification. We have to include established timelines for periodic reviews to determine if a modification is still necessary. We have to say that the interventions and supports, the modification process that the team is coming up with is not going to harm the individual in any way. And we have to include the informed consent of the individual. Because if an individual is on a calorie restricted diet at program and they bring their own lunch every day, but they want to eat out at program, we can't stop them unless they consent to stop, because you or I could be on a medication from our doctor or on a calorie restriction from our doctor, and we don't have to follow that if we don't want to. So the goal is that individuals have the same rights as we do, and they have the right to make poor choices if they want to, just like any other person.
And then can I add into that after you're finished?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll let you finish, and then I want to add my piece too, because I
Okay.
definitely feel like something what I have to share probably needs to be shared with the rest of the group. So go ahead and finish.
Okay. So I have an example of a modification that I just want to cover so we can like get through one. So we have, I'll go through one example and then I'll open up the floor. So if we have an individual with diabetes whose carbs and calories must be monitored according to his doctor, and he needs staff support to count those carbs and calories, but he is constantly taking snacks out of the kitchen without letting staff know. He takes his blood sugar once a day. It's recorded in a food diary. He consents to having kitchen cabinets locked or consents to having restricted access from food because he knows it's a problem and he would like more support than he has now. Because he admits that he has a hard time controlling his desire to snack constantly. That is a modification that we can put into place by saying this is a condition, this is what we've tried and hasn't worked, this is the informed consent of the individual, this is how we are going to record all that information. We can put that modification in place. But if he changes his mind and he says he doesn't want the kitchen cabinets locked up, we have to reverse that modification immediately. If a modification is in place and then that individual begins sneaking out his bedroom window to walk to the store at night and steal candy bars, and the next morning a staff finds to wake that he's ill, and when taken to the doctor, he admits to sneaking out to steal candy, we can no longer have that modification in place even with his consent, because it is causing more harm than it is good. He is unsupervised on the side of the road, stealing from a store. Even if he consents to it, we cannot assure that that modification is not going to cause him harm. It already has. He's already had to go to the doctor. If modification process is in place for him, and we need to also make sure that we have taken steps to ensure his housemates' rights are not being infringed upon. So if we have cabinets locked for that individual and his housemates don't have a reason to not have access to food at any time, his housemates need something in their IPP saying what we're doing to ensure that their rights are not being infringed upon. They could have a key to the cabinet so they can unlock it and get food at any time. We can put a mini fridge in that individual's room to ensure that they are getting access to food at any time while their roommate is not, etc. So we have to be creative in making sure that other individuals in that home's rights are not being infringed upon. If we've had a modification process in place for years with the individual with diabetes, and staff notice that that individual isn't asking for snacks as often, and the behavior specialist recommends keeping the kitchen unlocked while staff are in the kitchen to see if food seeking continues, and it doesn't, then we need to work with the behavior specialist and with the team and start to eliminate that modification process over time. It's not, we don't want to get to the point where it's been like 15 years with a modification process, and this is just what we do for this individual. We need to make sure that we are evaluating it often and seeing if it's still necessary. If a home feels like an individual needs a modification process and the individual does not want a modification process, then that home or program cannot meet the needs of that individual and should not be serving that individual if you can't meet their needs. And there was one other thing that I cannot remember. Sorry. Is there any questions or comments?
I do know there was a question in the chat, and then I'm also going to make David Lopez a co-host here so that he can speak when he's ready. But we did have a question in the chat. It's will SDP sorry, let me mute him. Okay.
Oh,
so
sorry.
Do you see the chat question?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, sweet.
I just did want to mention too that if individuals have a legal reason why they cannot follow the modification process, a modification is not necessary. If you have someone who has sex offender status who's not allowed near a park or something, it's not a modification, it's a by law. Staff cannot take them to that park. Like, even if they have given consent, like, oh, I'm going to go to this park. In that case, you just need to follow behavior support plans, protocols, probably calling a parole officer, et cetera, saying this individual is going to this park, I'm going to follow them, et cetera. That is not a modification for a legal reason.
Okay. No, that's a great example.
So SDP providers who have done the HCBS compliance, we don't have a list of those. So the SDP providers do the HC compliance assessment. That is between the FMS and the client. Those assessments are, and they are held by the FMS. So Alta doesn't have a list because they aren't vendors of Alta. We aren't in charge of oversight to them. So the FMS, DDS will require that the FMS has the SDP process in place. And they will make sure that those programs are HCBS compliant. And if there's a modification that needs to be done within that, that will be up to DDS to evaluate when they evaluate the FMS provider for those services. There is also, as a part of SDP, if you are funding
I'll give her just a second. And if it takes a minute here, we can give her just a second. And
we can go over to David Lopez. I know he wanted to share while she
yeah,
trying to log back in.
Okay, cool.
Oh man, I felt like she was talking about me with the diabetes thing. I do want to reemphasize to the group here, no matter what service you're providing as a vendor, we want to make sure and document in your notes, your daily notes or your reports to the regional center, your attempts of what you're trying to do with your particular client who may be facing these kind of health conditions and kind of going against the planning team's advice, or even if they're working well with their planning team advice. We don't want to just focus on the negative, but we also want to highlight some positive too. But typically me and my team, we usually get involved when the clients have difficulty following their plan. And one of the key things that I want to say and reemphasize is documentation of what you've tried to do and the continuing practices or plan that you're going to move forward with this client. Especially, I could speak to residential care homes. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the 4731 complaint process, but that is a client's right to appeal a decision against the regional center or a provider if they feel like their rights are being violated. So this is why it's so important for you guys to document everything that you're doing and making sure it all lines up, because at any point the client can agree to the plan and then change their mind. And if, we don't want to get into this battle struggle with the client just because, for example, I don't want to say, well, Jordan's a diabetic. She's agreed to, eat the right foods, but she's out there going to the local liquor store and buying candy, right? And so you're trying to hold her accountable to the IPP. Going through the IPP, number one, is important because you got the buy-in from all the planning team, even the client. But as it was emphasized, the client has a right to change their mind at any time. So instead of struggling with Jordan saying, you have this in your IPP, you can't go to the local store and buy all the candy you want, it's reminders saying, hey, that's not the best choice for you to do that, and making sure you guys document it, because there are natural consequences to their rights, just like anybody else. I get a lot of questions on my end, me and my team, about, clients have the rights, and we hear about rights, but there's also responsibility. 4502 under the Latterman Act says clients have the same rights and responsibilities as everybody else, regardless of their developmental disability or not. So they're going to have to face that consequence. I live with diabetes on a day-to-day basis in my life. So if I choose to have something that I know is not good for my health, then I got to face that consequence, whatever action is going to happen. But documentation is going to go a long way, because even though you're doing the right thing, if you don't have it documented, then it just becomes what Jordan says and what I say. So if I'm a provider, I'm going to document everything that I've talked to Jordan about to back myself up and my vendors or my staff up, because I'm going to show the regional center, this is what we've done. This is how we're going to move forward. And if Jordan wants to put in a 4731 complaint, which then would include, Office of Clients' Rights to be involved, I have my reports to be able to say, Jordan was being difficult a little bit, but we're going to say it in a different way. We've tried to work with Jordan as much as we can, but she just continues to push back on us. And so we have to reevaluate it. And please don't feel like you're alone. Use the support of the planning team. Call the service coordinator, call the family. You guys come back together. I want you guys to understand that you're not alone when it comes to the struggles that you may have with clients. You got the whole support of the regional center and the planning team process to be able to do that. So I could talk all day on that, and I'll just keep my mouth quiet.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, David. And yeah, I like me some gummy bears. I got to keep away from those liquor stores so I don't be buying me candy.
Jordan, there's one more thing I wanted to mention because it comes up a lot.
Okay, great.
It's that HCBS doesn't trump Title 17 or 22, and 22 and 17 don't trump HCBS. So when you're talking about modification process, like specifically one I can think of is with visitors. If you're restricting visitors, you have to follow the modification process within HCBS, but there is also a process to restricting visitors in Title 17 that has to be renewed every 30 days. So by limiting visitors, you have to follow both sets of regulations. So I just don't want people to get lost in we've done everything for HCBS to deny these specific rights. because, and this individual consents to it because there's also a Title 17 or Title 22 process to a lot of these too.
Very good point. Very good point. I do see that Eric has his hand up. We'll definitely take questions, but I see Eric's got his hand raised from UCP if you wanted to address.
Sure. My question was about the family component to this. So a lot of, for say a fully independent adult, a lot of this I don't have many questions about, but we have noticed sometimes when we're working with family supports, parents that are very much involved in their adult care, they, may not be fully conserved, but it's in somewhere on a spectrum, at least in the parent's mind, and are very involved in helping manage those supports. Sometimes we run into those questions of them wanting us or expecting services to be delivered or being upset, in terms of a service that they would want their individual protected. Say, for example, why did you allow, under your example, John to have those candy? Again, we told you not to, right? For example. So how is this sort of HCBS from person-centered planning all the way through all of the federal regs? How does this get communicated to parents and families and consumers of the system when they wish the system would give them more control or flexibility in a way that then runs a problem? How is that education or communication happening with parents or support?
It should be happening on the planning team level through our service coordinators, talking with families when families are requesting certain things happen. If an individual is conserved, the conservator can make the decision that, and they can make the decision of consent for modification. But if they aren't conserved, then those individuals have those choices. And that should be on a planning team level. Like, we have a discussion, we talk about the rights and wrongs, we talk about what steps we're going to do to try to mitigate the risk, to help individuals make good choices. We write an ISP with goals in it. We could have a behavior support plan that sort of helps with that. But in the long run, individuals still get to make any decision that they want to make, just like you or I do. So unless the entire team has agreed to a modification process, including the individual or the conservator, then it's mostly just a lot of dialogue and conversation with families. There's no real legal recourse a family who doesn't have conservatorship has if an individual is making poor choices, unless they are conserved. They can complain and say, why would you let him do that? And I think that would be a great time for a planning team meeting to say,
you can't lock them in the room and hope that they don't go out in the community again because they're making bad choices. Regardless if they're conserved or not, they're still going to make bad choices. So I just want to share that too. I'm sorry about cutting in.
No, it's okay. Yes, that is another good point. Like, and modifications specifically under HCBS, the individual has to agree to. So if the individual is like, I agree to not going in the community and taking candy bars, and then they do anyway, then they have just revoked their consent by acting on that. So then that modification process is no longer valid anyway.
Well, as a provider, I certainly agree. And we are working, to continue to respect all of those boundaries as people's decision-making changes. But there have been times I've wished that the families understood that, and maybe there was a handout written for families, explaining, this so that it's not coming from us and they don't make a complaint against us that we are running an unsafe program because we allowed this to happen or something like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just something that to keep in mind. Maybe it exists. If so, just having something where we can, that's family focused or, participant focused. We're saying, hey, this is how this applies and what your providers are trying to do so that it's not all us to explain that. And the planning team, sure, but sometimes when the planning team comes in, there's already a issue that's trying to be resolved. So it's like nice to be ahead of it and say, hey, here's why that policy exists. Here's the federal regulation that we have to follow, which we can do on our side, but I just think there could be some family education. So that's my feedback.
Well, and I don't want to speak for Catherine at Southside, but she has this steering committee starting in September where they're going to talk about person-centered practices and client rights and trying to make organizational changes. And they are asking for parents, clients, providers, service coordinators, whoever wants to attend those quarterly, to attend, to try to make that change in mindset across all services and all parts of the planning team. And so I think that would be a really great thing for them to explore as well. Like, how can we help parents understand the rights of their individuals, knowing that they need the support needs that they need. So that is something that we will have more dialogue about. We have lots of grant stuff that's going on regarding person-centered training and person-centered thinking, so that we have staff on board. We have DSPs at care homes on board, care home providers, day program providers, and parents. That's something that we are striving to do, is make this knowledge widespread and make clients' rights like a focus in our regional center, rather than something that's just on the back burner, which sometimes happens because we're caught up in day-to-day stuff.
Thank you, guys. Any other questions or comments regarding that? Super helpful information, Alicia. Really appreciate that. And I think I'm assuming a lot of people know what the regulation sections are for the federal regulations for HCBS. But if you have any helpful links or sections you want to put into the chat, feel free to put those in the chat. I think most people are hopefully savvy to parts of that now. And let's see. I don't see anything in the chat. So then thank you so much, Alicia. Really appreciate it. Then we can move on now to Miss Helen. Helen was going to provide an update on our transportation services and some meetings coming up.
Yeah, hello, good morning. Alta is continuing to work on transitioning our transportation services to the broker. And right now, the broker is R&D Transportation. Can you hear me, Jordan?
I can hear you. I'm trying to spotlight you, but for some reason I can't find you in my list or on my screen. So I'll spotlight you as soon as I can, but we can totally hear you. Sorry,
Oh, okay.
having
All right.
technical issue.
Yeah. So we are having a kind of meet and greet with the provider on August 8th, and most of the transportation providers are here. That are here probably already were sent the invitation by Marty Eason. And also an FYI, if we have any transportation providers, if you had gotten a contract that was extended until September 30, 2023, that is because the R&D broker will establish their contract anyway. So instead of drafting a whole new contract for 3 years, we decided to extend your contract right now until September 30. And when R&D takes over, they will draft up a whole new contract for you. So that's all I have right now. It's an update, and I'll take questions.
No questions? Oh. Thank you, Helen. It is exciting. I know that the changeover. No comments or questions on that one?
I had a question.
Okay, great.
Helen, maybe I misunderstood, but at the last transportation meeting when we went over this, I thought contracting was not a primary responsibility of R&D, that the regional center was still going to be managing transportation contracting and provider requirements. But it sounds like what you just said, that the contracting piece is getting moved to R&D. Maybe I misheard the first one or the second one. Could you kind of clarify that? Has that changed, or what's the policy on, provider?
Yes, we had a clarification with R&D when we met with them that they will draft up the contract. And yeah, that was clarified. after our meeting with R&D, and we will have a chance to talk more about that on August 8th when we meet with them.
With the provider group, right?
Yeah, with the broker.
I think I'll just put a note just for something to think about. I think that's something that I will have concerns about, allowing a third party to do the contract. That was a primary concern that at least I had before. So we can talk about it at that meeting, or maybe we can talk about it however you guys choose to, but that I'd like to understand what that means, because that was something that at least was a concern for me. So we'll see how the 8th goes, and we'll go from there.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Does anybody else have any other agenda items they'd like to chat about? We got about 12 minutes. I will share, just while we're at the end here of coffee, kind of some upcoming events that are currently on our Alta website. So if you go to altaregional.org/calendar, right, you will find our calendar. And you guys see my screen okay? Yes, Helen?
Yes, Jordan. we
Okay,
see it.
sweet. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
So we do have an early start job fair that's happening at Alta Regional Center on Wednesday, August 9th. Jennifer Bloom let me know that they do have about 15 or 16 providers that have signed up to be at the job fair. So we're excited to be hosting that. I know they've been doing a lot of advertising at LinkedIn and colleges and different things. So I know that we're very excited about that. Helen, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add on the job fair, but it will be right here at the regional center office. It's going to be from 10 to 2 p.m. next Wednesday. And you can check out this website here. Any questions on that one? Okay. Kind of going back to the main calendar. We do have our deaf and hard of hearing vendor forum that Rima had mentioned, right? That's going to be from 1 to 2:30, also on Wednesday the 9th. That's going to be virtual. There is the caseload ratio public meeting that will be held Thursday, August 10th from 12 to 1. You can click on these links to learn a little bit more, but this is really right just to share with our stakeholders and our public the current matters with staff service coordinator to client ratios. So that's always, always good to hear from our public at these public meetings. Let's see, there's a full flyer here that just gives you the information. It will be via Zoom. We will have Spanish and ASL translators available. So let me go back over here. And then we also have our Family Support Services webinar, August 10th. That's going to be from 2 to 3. And like we mentioned before, when Rima is on, there is the Deaf Awareness Day at Six Flags. So that will be an exciting event if folks want to go out to that. And it looks like we also have an inclusive play day at Southside Park. So we'll talk a little bit more about those things next week, but that's the week of events, here. So that was all that we had for our agenda today. I really appreciate Jason and Alicia and Rima sharing their information for us. It's always good to learn from you guys, and I hope you guys all have a safe weekend, and we'll be back next Friday. John Decker will be here as well.
Okay, I'm gonna go have some candy now.
Okay, behave. Just kidding. See
You
you
guys
later.
all have a good day.
Thanks,
Bye.
Jordan.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Well, hopefully I have a beautifully signed